The Elephant Graveyard is a YouTube channel that makes video essays critiquing Joe Rogan. They've covered other topics. Did you see this?
Yeah, I think it was linked on the subreddit. I watched it. It was good, I thought.
Yes, well, so it's called How Comedy Was Destroyed by an Anti-Reality Doomsday Cult. And he did a critical analysis of Joe Rogan's special and comedy career, right? So I think it's like a comedy-focused channel, but it produces these satirical, critical video essays, right? Which are done in this like...
kind of a cinematic documentary type style. It's got music and the voiceover. They're very well produced.
The style reminds me very much of this documentary filmmaker from the UK, Adam Curtis, who makes documentaries that tend to combine like archival footage along with like a spoken narrative, right? That is talking about these kind of shifts in societal thinking. And he's talking about the rise of consumerism or like mass production things, these kind of things. They tend to have like a little bit of an anti-capitalist critique of modern society aspect to them, but it was very popular around about like 15 years ago. There's a very good critique of that style. Like it's just about, I think, 4 or 5 minutes long, where somebody takes apart the kind of style, right? Showing that.
Oh, I have seen that too. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's kind of a spoof of it. Right.
Yes, it's showing, but it's showing what you do, right? Like where you can.
Here I am. Yeah, here's a transition to a thing, and here I am walking through a thing. Why?
I think you're combining two things there, Matt. Because one is the Charlie Brooker, like screenwrite thing, where he did a parody about like news reports, and he was, giving a news report, but like the format of a BBC news report, showing all of the various like tropes that they use, like walking down the street, talking into a camera while all the people, walk around not reacting.
It starts here with a lackluster establishing shot of a significant location. Next, a walkie-talkie preamble from the auteur, pacing steadily towards the lens, punctuating every other sentence with a hand gesture and ignoring all the pricks milling around him like he's gliding through the fucking Matrix, before coming to a halt and posing a question. What comes next? Often something like this, a filler shot designed to give your eyes something to look at while my voice babbles on about facts. Sometimes it'll slow down to a halt, turn monochrome, and some of those facts will appear one by one on the screen. This is followed by the obligatory shots of overweight people with their faces subtly framed out.
But that video, which is in a similar vein, like critically evaluating the style, is showing that, there is an issue in Adam Curtis stuff, which is that he papers over a lot of like fairly large leaps in logic by putting emotionally evocative stock footage.
In 1992, a strange and brilliant That's Life researcher with a Skinny Puppy CD embarked upon a career of producing documentaries about how ideas can spark social movements. Adam Curtis believed that 200,000 Guardian readers watching BBC Two could change the world. But this was a fantasy. In fact, he had created the televisual equivalent of a drunken late-night Wikipedia binge with pretension to narrative coherence. Combining archived documentary material with interviews, Curtis filled in the gaps by vomiting grainy library footage onto the screen to a soundtrack of Brian Eno and Nine Inch Nails. He had discovered that it did not matter what footage he used, so long as he changed the shots so bewilderingly fast that the audience didn't notice the chasm between argument and conclusion. This was especially effective when he simply cut the music mid-bar. And as a result, Thabo Mbeki was swept to power at the next general election.
So it's like kind of the visuals make up for some of the lacks in evidence.
Yeah, I think that's inherent to the form, right? Like I enjoyed that, but I sort of took it as a dunk. I took it for what it is, right? But it is not evidence. It is not an argument by like any kind of analytic argument. It's an intuitive, vibe-based critique, right? And it's very compelling. It's very compelling. It can be like, I think it's correct, right? So when it's
in many respects, correct.
Large, like directionally correct, shall we say, about Joe Rogan. That's what the sense makers would say. But the details, I wouldn't trust the details.
Oh yes, and I can give 2 examples that like highlight to me this, because this video is very much in that format. Like, it's a long form video essay detailing like Joe Rogan and the Austin comedy scene and how he's kind of skewed it towards his politics and like the humiliation rituals involved in like getting part of that clique. And he also talks about Tony Hinchcliffe and the Kill Tony format, and basically he's talking about in a very disparaging way about the effect that Rogan's had on comedy on the US. And I think he makes a very good case for it, right? But layered on top of it is what the title says, that Joe Rogan has created an anti-reality doomsday cult, and that the comedy scene bears all these parallels with like the Jonestown and various other, UFO cults. And it's using stock footage. It's playing clips where the leaders of the cult movements are then played, beside Joe Rogan, sounding similar in certain aspects of the rhetoric. And it is very much wanting you to go along with that. Now, I agree with you, Matt, that I took from it like as viewed as like a provocative framing device, right? And understanding that there is a lot of like poetic liberty that's being used.
Yes.
As a critical essay, I'm completely on board. And I think directionally and in a lot of specific details, there's a lot of validity to the criticisms that are raised. And I'm also overall very glad to see this kind of media, which, gets attention online and is calling out the bias of Rogan and his sycophants and like, shining a critical eye on it, but in an entertaining way. So my main takeaway is like, I'm glad this exists and that it's got attention and people are paying attention to it. Now, in specific details though, I think it can, as a result, be actually misleading, and like that there is an issue with that. For example, he talks about Eric and Brett Weinstein in it, and he plays clips of Eric's appearance on Rogan with the water wiggle. He zooms in on the water wiggle and he's making the point that like, he's basically saying Eric is a buffoon and Brett is a buffoon, right? And he plays the clip of them talking about how far ahead they are of everyone else, that they know when everyone else is saying they're wrong, that they're right.
When we do our homework and we discover something interesting and absolutely nobody else gets it, to you and me, that feels good. To know that you have achieved something and that nobody else can even recognize it gives you some sort of sense of how far ahead you might be.
Remember, it's not a lie if you believe it.
And this is all good, but in using those clips, he's talking about how Rogan uncritically accepts Eric's view of himself. And in that actual video, Rogan actually came across fairly skeptical of Eric.
Smaller neck. Like we had a huge bottle to get it into metrics. There's another space.
People are listening to this, They're not just seeing it. Very few people are seeing it.
Well,
maybe like 30%.
Okay. If
this is a problem. This conversation's a problem. Because people are going to have to... people are tuning out right now, guaranteed.
Well, if you go to pull that up, Jamie Duck... Look, there's no way in which I can talk about tensor analysis, curvature tensors, the theory of everything.
I understand, but I want you to boil this down. You're not boiling it down at all. Why did you do this, and what are you trying to accomplish with this?
I think he was mocking Eric. Like he was quite dismissive. He was really quite mean to him in that moment, right? But this is what I mean, right? You're right. It is misleading. And it's a bit deceptive, right, given that. But generally, Rogan is incredibly accepting of Eric and Brett's genius, So,
he is right about that. Because, even though Rogan was skeptical and in a bad mood in that episode and, interrupted Eric, with using pull-that-up-jamie.com and getting annoyed about it and whatnot, he's also talked in other episodes about how he uses Eric as his, bullshit fact-checking device. Right. So he definitely does buy into a lot of Eric's shtick, but there were just various examples like that where I was a bit more familiar with the context. And I was like, well, but that's not exactly right. He presents these comedians as the fact that they're made to smoke cigars and sniff Joe's underarms as like a humiliation ritual.
Really just doing whatever they got to do to appease him, no matter how debasing or humiliating it might be for them.
This is Chris Stefano's very first time ever.
Okay.
Lighting and smoking a cigar.
Okay. Yeah. Is this the right way?
Yeah.
He's going to vomit. I want to see him vomit.
Get it on there. Get it on there. All right, you're good. Just start pulling. No, you're not. Breathe in while you're doing that. I felt it in his face. Puff. Keep puffing. There we go.
This is so mean.
Yeah, smells. Take a sniff of these bits. Come take a sniff.
Take a smell. Yeah, you want me to go on the other side?
Yes, my king.
Come take a sniff.
Humiliation.
Yeah, that's right. Get in there.
Yeah.
Humiliation.
And he's present these comedians as being brainwashed. But actually, one of those comedians throughout that whole episode was like kind of taking the piss out of Rogan, and it was going over his head. So like he coughed when he smoked the cigar and stuff, but he was kind of pointing out the absurdity of like a lot of Rogan's takes. But in the framing, he's presented as like, you know, debasing himself to become part of the in-group. And again, it's like, it's directionally correct because a lot of comedians do that. Like he plays Jimmy Carr talking to Rogan about doing cold plunges and how important they are to him now. And that is him, right? Like pandering. But the other comedian where he's highlighting, it's not exactly the way he presents it. So like it's nitpicking, right? But I find that kind of thing, it's the kind of thing where somebody can point out, well, actually, this is just like, you know, a hit piece because it's actually misrepresenting various details.
Well, it's a difference between art and science, Chris. It's not what they're doing. It's not the science like geometry, but you know, it's better. It's better. The production values are higher. So
yeah, well, this is true. It's got much bigger reach, right, in that respect as well. But Matt, now one part of it that, and the reason I brought it up here, apart from just, you know, it's obviously related to things that we talk about and people were sharing it all over the place, is that at the end, it does veer towards, like the thesis of this, apart from all the critiques of Rogan, is that Rogan is really essentially a puppet of a global anti-human tech elite, like Peter Thiel and so on, who are using Rogan to like kind of take over society. And I've got a clip, right, that will highlight this. So listen to this and see if you think this is like intended as ironic.
They use their techno-wizardry to seize control of human behavior and thought, creating their palantir to be both completely addictive and to devolve all human interaction into complete negativity. Once that happens, our I gotta get the hell out of here gene activates. And when there's nowhere else to go, the cult offers escape pods into their simulacrum, which really are psychic apocalypse bunkers. The cult's goal is to destroy what they call the cathedral, which encompasses all the elements of our society that influence our thoughts and beliefs about the world. Everything from public education and universities to cultural industries, the media, and of course the new mainstream media like podcasts. Once all these institutions are destroyed, the cult can assume control of all of them, and then they can dictate public opinion and the direction our society should go, which for them is an authoritarian monarchy run by an autocratic CEO king. They call this the Dark Enlightenment. People have been talking about this already, but for some reason nobody has ever pointed out that comedy is also part of the cathedral. Because comedy is a tool that can cut through the illusion of hyperreality, one that can topple the pillars that uphold a simulacrum. They must destroy it. They've been doing this for as long as comedy has been a thing. And the cult identified their perfect target to infiltrate both the comedy and podcast world, the most gullible man in mainstream media. It was so easy. They just led Joe down the path into the simulacrum with money and validation, and now he's their mainstream media puppet.
Yeah. That's seems to be taking it a bit far. Don't you think?
Yeah, because like the response will always be, no, that is like he's just doing a parody, right? Of the like it's not meant to be serious, but like, isn't it? Because it sounds to me very much that he does, if you watch his other content as well, like he doesn't like Peter Thiel and stuff, just like we don't, right? But what he's laying out there is that like Joe Rogan is a gullible fool. And he's been used by the powers of be to warp comedy, to attack institutions and stuff. And like, there's a way in which that's valid, right? Like you can say that, yes, Joe Rogan is a stupid fool and he does uncritically promote various people that are attacking institutions. You know, he promotes Eric Weinstein, he promotes Peter Thiel, and so on. But in this version, it's like Joe's rise was controlled by those forces because they need to undermine the power of like comedy, right, as a pillar of society. And you're like, well, but that's the same. Like, you're actually
you're proposing a conspiracy theory, really. I mean,
yes,
and the response when to people who will often say that over, they go, no, I'm saying this is the systemic things, and the actors don't necessarily know, but this is what's really going on. I still think it is basically like a conspiracy when you are proposing there is some grand dynamic that is orchestrating things. Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because on one hand, there is a way in which it's kind of true, right? Like, for instance, I describe Jordan Peterson as an accidental fascist, right? It's not a coincidence that he's in the same sort of realm as those Dark Enlightenment people, Curtis Yarvin, who are in a similar direction. But
or that Curtis Yarvin was promoted by Peter Thiel, right? Like that he is financially backed and promoted by Peter Thiel.
Yeah.
So there are connections, right?
There are connections, but there's you always have to sort of, I think you always have to be conservative and take the simplest explanation, which is, and one of the dumbest ones is probably more sophisticated than this, but the dumbest null hypothesis is that there are a bunch of dickheads who like the same stuff, right?
Yeah.
And you move on from there cautiously.
Yeah, and this doesn't mean that they don't have these stupid apocalyptical, like techno-utopian dreams. Like, we've heard them talk about this, right? But you've also heard Curtis Yarvin and Peter Thiel, like what their level of intellect is. Do you really think they're in 20-dimensional chess, like plotting out Joe Rogan's career? No, they're morons, right? Now, are they morons that can have really damaging impacts on society? Yes, but like, you're giving them too much credit by imagining that like Peter Thiel, decided that like Joe Rogan was the vector that he could use to dismantle. Like, he hired Eric Weinstein because he likes Eric Weinstein's criticisms of institutions. Like, well, who knows what he thinks about whether Eric is actually like a physics genius or not. But like, Eric Weinstein also, all the things we've documented, he would attack institutions because he views himself as this unrecognized genius. So like, they're all in agreement, right? They're all these kind of narcissistic idiots who imagine that they can run things better and they will promote people that they think will attack institutions and so on. But it's that notion that like, actually at the fundamental heart, they are the masters of the universe. Like, you've heard the All In podcast. Yeah. They're not these genius 200 IQ people that have got this all worked out. They're people that are trying to promote their interests, but it's, I feel like this kind of framing, it is a conspiracy theory, but it's one that appeals to like left-wing people more.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course it is. Yeah. I mean, there's heaps of conspiratorial type explanations for things that are quite intricate and involve some sort of moving parts behind the scenes that involve the powerful baddies colluding together, orchestrating a master plan to screw the rest of us over. And that is an attractive way to look at things. Like, it is, and it makes for better content. Like, it's a very entertaining. Like, I enjoyed the bits of that thing that I watched. It's entertaining. It's lots of visuals and music, and it's intuitively right. And it's correct. It was correct enough for me not to have a problem with it. But if you take it too seriously and you take it literally, then no. It is basically a conspiracy theory that you have to just exercise Occam's razor, and it's like you don't need to propose that they have a complicated plan and that these things are connected and purposeful. There are simpler explanations.
Because there's an example given of Duncan Trussell, who's a comedian that warned Joe Rogan in the past. It's this clip that always gets played of him saying, as your platform gets bigger, there's going to be people come in and try to, use you and your open-mindedness for like promoting their nefarious agendas, right? And then the Elephant Graveyard guy plays a clip of him like defending Peter Thiel now recently. Like, you know, people say Peter Thiel's got an agenda, but I met him and he's like a super nice guy, and those things are, and he's like, this is, the guy has completely, you know, backflipped on his positions because he's now part of the Rogan cult. Like, he sold out his values. And I was like, or he's just a gullible comedian who, you know, like all the people in the guru sphere and elsewhere, tends to overvalue interpersonal interactions, and like, you know, he was flattered talking to a billionaire.
Yeah, response to flattery, all that stuff. I mean, take a different example, right? This is a good little example of what we're talking about. So Lex Fridman, right? His niche, analogous to Joe Rogan's. You could do a thing on him. This guy probably has. I think he has. You know, he's found a role for himself to do these incredibly self-indulgent, long-form softball interviews, right? Yeah. Where he will never ask a difficult question, and he will basically platform the person and give them every chance to provide the best version of themselves. Yes. So functionally, he has found a role for himself where he makes a lot of money, does very, very well, thank you very much, because he can book really high-profile guests who will go on his show knowing that they have a safe space in order to do their thing. Right from Netanyahu to whoever.
Jeff
Bezos. Yeah, that's right. Now, is it part of a plan? Like, is there, like, has he been, like, did some people get in contact with him and say, now, Lex, we're going to offer you a deal, right? Will you do this? And no, he just fell into this, right?
Although, people will point out that, like, part of his rise is because he made that, like, paper, the AI paper with Elon Musk. Elon Musk appears.
Yes,
and that
exactly.
gives him a big boost.
He's naturally a sycophant, right? And I don't doubt, right, that his strategy from the very beginning was like he genuinely would idolize people like Elon Musk because he's an idiot.
Yes,
and he's a natural sycophant. And so I think there's definitely some intentionality on his side. And then the rest just kind of unfolds. You know what I mean? It's a process that can naturally happen.
It's not that Elon Musk messaged him behind the scene and said, you know, can you produce a paper for me that makes, you know, the Tesla approach seem like the better option. No, like Lex did that of his own volition because he is a giant Elon dick rider and a huge sycophant. Like that's what he is, right?
Yeah. So it's a subtle distinction, isn't there, right? Because the grain of truth is there, right? There's the functional.
There are networks. There is money flowing. There is attention. There are, like, you know, Lex and various other podcasters were at the inauguration of Trump. They helped him, you know, in his campaign by giving him sympathetic, long form podcasts and whatnot. Like, all of that is true.
Yeah. It's just don't attribute a level of forethought and collusion and organization, which is just not there. I remember the same things were about the conspiracy theories about the CIA and stuff like that. It's analogous, right? So CIA indisputably has done a lot of dodgy shit. Well documented.
It does have plans.
Throughout the world. It does have plans or whatever. But then there's what the conspiracy theorists kind of imagine them to be, right? Which is like this all-powerful, you know, incredibly brilliant kind of Machiavellian network that can orchestrate the most improbable things.
Yes.
And then when the evidence comes out, it just turns out that they are nowhere near as capable as...
Yeah, they're a lot more incompetent than people credit them. Yes, I agreed. So like you said, it is a little bit of a nuanced argument because it's not the Shermer position, right? The Shermer position is stupid. The Shermer position is there are real conspiracies in the world. Therefore, you should accept that basically all conspiracies are valid until proven otherwise, right? Yes. Which is, he doesn't even live by, but he, you know, on anti-woke stuff, he's basically made this case to show that he's sympathetic to conspiracy mindset. And like, no, that is not right. There being actual conspiracies doesn't therefore mean conspiracy theories are equally likely to be true as not true. The majority of conspiracy theories are not true. And conspiracy theories by their nature are different than the kinds of conspiracies that have been revealed throughout history, because often what's revealed is much less coordinated, much less professional than what people imagine. The other thing about them is that they are most often exposed by people that are investigative journalists or whistleblowers, not conspiracy theorists, right? Because their approach is not the right one to uncovering conspiracies. So you can perfectly accept that there are real conspiracies in the world, that some of them have not been uncovered, and that they include government agencies and people in power and networks coordinating. These do exist. There are being people promoted, very media networks and so on. And that conspiracy theories have a particular quality that makes them unfalsifiable and puts them into the category of conspiracy theory. And there's a whole bunch of characteristics which we've gone through in previous content. They would include things like positing a small group of people operating on nefarious motivations, right? And so on.
Like the definition of a conspiracy theory is incredibly broad.
I mean, it depends which one you use. There are ones which are very specific, right?
I know there are ones, but this will do, right? Because the general way in which it's used, which is a theory that an event or phenomenon occurs as a result of a conspiracy between interested parties.
Right. Well, that is not. I've given a talk where I dispute that is a valid, because that encompasses like essentially.
Well, this is my point.
Almost everything.
But that's the problem that makes it difficult to talk about, right? Because people shift between definitions, right? Where they say, "Oh, but conspiracies have been proven." It's like, yes, but conspiracies happen all the time, like all the time.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's why I think we almost got to ban talking about conspiracy theories, and you have to talk about conspiratorial ideation.
Oh yeah, that's your hobby horse.
It's my hobby horse, but it's true as a psychologist, because there's nothing wrong with conspiracy theories, right? Or a theory that a conspiracy is happening. There's nothing wrong.
This hurts my soul, Matt. I think we've debated this as well before, but I agree with people like Stefan Lewandowski who argue, no, you should not be using conspiracy theory and conspiracies interchangeably. They're two separate things. I agree with that. And the basis for him making that claim is what you're saying. So this is the connection, is that conspiracy theories are based on conspiratorial ideation. The uncovering of conspiracies is not based on conspiratorial ideation. So there's a connection in his framework. But you want to say people use the word conspiracy theories for both categories.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
But me and Stefan, we disagree that we should adopt that nomenclature.
Yeah, I think it's semantic. I think I'm saying the same thing as Lewandowski, and I agree with his point of view as well, right? Which is it's the aberrant pathological version of thinking about conspiracies, right? That is the problem.
Yes.
And actually the other definition, which is better, which is what I said before, but it's got a little clause, when other explanations are more probable. Now, I like that because that distinguishes what we're talking about, right? So no doubt someone like Epstein was involved in all kinds of conspiracies, right? He was covering up his own behavior, getting, deals. Must have been some people. He was in a conspiracy with his assistant, whatever her name is. So that's fine to talk about those. It's fine to suspect that there might be other conspiracies that he was involved in. He almost certainly was involved in other conspiracies we don't know about, right? But it's about being all in, having a lot of confidence in a conspiracy when other explanations are more probable. It's an unfounded confidence in a theory. And theories, like, it's connected to Occam's razor and stuff like that, because the thing that characterizes conspiracy theories is that they're so baroque. Like you said, it's the exception hunting, right? They find a lot of details, dismiss all the other evidence, right? And find a way to make scattered bits of evidence fit a particular explanation, usually a conspiratorial one. And if you apply good, I guess, rigorous thinking, then you go, well, what about this more simple explanation, which is, all else being equal, going to be much more probable?
Yeah, I will mention, Matt, as I do in my talk where I've discussed this particular topic, there's a section on Wikipedia in the entry for conspiracy theory, which is titled Difference from Conspiracy. And I think it's a pretty good encapsulation of the difference. I won't go through all of them, but it mentions the causes of events or situations are simplified to exclude complex or interacting factors, as well as the role of chance and unintended consequences. Nearly all observations are explained as having been deliberately planned by the alleged conspirators. This is a difference, right, between a conspiracy theory and a conspiracy, right? Like, so there's an overarching plan that is, you know, it's kind of like, think about Alex Jones, right, as the archetype of a conspiracy theorist. Is Alex Jones going to uncover genuine conspiracies with the way that he reasons about the world? No. And if he does, it will be by complete coincidence, right? So that's part of the point. Now, Matt, to make the distinction clear, I had a second clip. I'll just play it as a bookend and see if we can detect any of these themes that we're talking about in the elephant graveyard presentation. So this is following on from that first clip that we heard about the tech oligarchs and their plans.
And comedy is fucking crumbling, taken over by the cult. You think this is crazy? Who are the guys at the top of this cult? It's J.D. Vance.
We're letting a grown man walk around in a miniskirt in broad daylight?
It's the techno-wizard billionaires. It's Elon, Mark Andreessen.
For sure these things are being censored.
It's fucking Peter Thiel.
Talk about what's gone wrong in the U.S. because
they're all friends of the show. Weird, eh?
Everything's so much worse, you know?
Hello? They use comedy and podcasting as a fun Trojan horse to sneak themselves into the culture. And Joe and all his enablers let it all happen. Just sold out the entire comedy world. All while he preaches about the importance of comedy and how much it means to him.
It was a religious call.
It's all a ruse, a great big scheme, a spectacle, comedy kayfabe.
250 comics.
In the cult's hyper-reality, he's the head of comedy. But in classic reality, he's the gangrenous toe of the comedy world, slowly spreading its vile infection throughout the rest of its body. It's messed up, man, but that's how comedy got so shit. I mean, I think we all knew it was Joe Rogan's fault, but yeah, I don't know. I don't think most people realize he's just one part of an intricate and pervasive takeover of the entire country. And if you're a comedy cultist and you want to write this off as a conspiracy theory, you should remember the teachings of Dear Leader.
When you do have an open mind and you are compelled to try to seek the truth, you got to be aware that these things have happened in history. They are real. As much as people who look for conspiracies and everything, there are also people who try to dismiss everything. And you have to be very careful because there are a lot of things that people do conspire to do.
Well, yeah, Joe there is a perfect...
Yeah,
perfectly illustrates what we were talking about, that getting confused about those two things. But yeah, I mean, look, if he edited that just slightly and changed a few words or whatever, you could keep the poetic language, keep the kind of Rick, keep the Rick. It reminds me of Rick and Morty.
Rick and Morty, it does have a Rick and Morty theme to it. Yeah,
and you could slam Joe just as hard for like, you know, having all these people on and being this uncritical platform for a whole bunch of shitty ideas, right? Yeah, you could just leave the conspiracy bit out of it.
Yeah, and that, so the thing is that I think it depends on how seriously you take the thesis that he's offering. But again, Matt, this is one of those things where you look at the reactions online and there's a large amount of people that aren't regarding this as, you know, just like a speculative essay that is actually just intended to be, you know, like a critical takedown.
A bit of poetry and almost a bit of an artwork in a way.
Yeah, it's more like there is a lot of people that are like, yeah, he's absolutely revealing, you know, the core underpinnings of Rogan's world, and you're
That's a shame. That's a bit like taking like Werner Herzog too seriously. You know?
Yeah, it is. So like, I like the video, and I think if you appreciate it for what it's actually doing and what it does very well, it's great at it. But you have to take it the same way you would take an Adam Curtis, you know, episode with like some of the claims made there a little bit of leaps in logic, and insofar as it's like attacking the Rogan sphere and highlighting the cruelty and the kind of right-wing bias that is there and his treatment of millionaires and so on, but like, all good. Yeah. Like, we completely agree. Like, we are not of the thing that, oh, Joe Rogan has no ideology, right? We've produced many episodes highlighting he does push a particular political agenda. Our original episode on him makes that incredibly clear. So our argument isn't, oh, Joe Rogan, you know, the only way to analyze him is like as a narcissist. Like he does push a particular political agenda.
But take a moment to appreciate Joe Rogan, ultimate conspiracist, ultimate sucker for every conspiracy theory. He himself being the subject of something that's a bit
yeah. I know. I gotta love that. I like it when it happens, like when Eric is claimed to be the architect of the Great Reset. Like them getting hoisted by their own petard is there's a juiciness to that. So I do thank the Elephant Graveyard for that. But like, so you know, Matt, I think both you and I are saying this is a thing that's worth watching. It's quite entertaining. It's good. Very well made. And it's more good than bad in terms of like critique versus. I think it's just if you approach it like a bit too credulously.
Don't take it too literally.
Consume critically. That's our general theme